Some Chinese cities feel like museums, frozen in time. But Wuhan is different. The Yangtze River flows through the city, while the Han River joins it here. Trains, ships, bridges, and endless streams of people keep Wuhan moving forward day after day. Over the past century, Wuhan has stood at the turning points of Chinese history more than once. But perhaps the most moving thing about this city is not its grand historical moments. It is the life that continues afterward. Every morning, people still step out of their homes, walk through the humid summer streets, and quietly begin another ordinary day. For many people in Wuhan, the day often begins with a bowl of hot, dry noodles. Sesame paste, alkaline noodles, pickled radish. Simple, direct, and served fast. Much like the city itself. Here, the Yangtze River and the Han River meet. Ports, railways, crowds, cargo. For generations, countless things have converged here. And over time, Wuhan became a city that rarely slows down.
The next stop is Wuhan Railway Station.
Many people assume that Wuhan was always a single city, but in reality, it originally began as 3 separate towns that developed independently over time: Wuchang, Hankou, and Hanyang. The Yangtze River and the Han River meet here, dividing the 3 towns across different shores. It was not until 1927 that the 3 towns were officially merged. Wu comes from Wuchang, while Han comes from Hankou and Hanyang. And that was when the name Wuhan truly came into being. If you ask someone from Wuhan what the most iconic landmark of this city is, many would probably answer the Yellow Crane Tower. What makes the Yellow Crane Tower special is not simply its location beside the river, nor merely the sophistication of its architecture. For many Chinese people, it is the real-world anchor of the poems they memorized as children. More than 1,800 years ago, during the Three Kingdoms period, Sun Quan built a tower on Snake Hill, overlooking the Yangtze River. At first, it was simply a military watchtower, and it was not yet called the Yellow Crane Tower. Legend says that an immortal once rode a yellow crane past this place and flew away, never to return. And so people began calling it Yellow Crane Tower. During the Tang Dynasty, great poets such as Cui Hao, Li Bai, and Meng Haoran left behind timeless verses here. Poems about the Yangtze River, about farewell, and about the passage of time. Over the centuries, the Yellow Crane Tower gradually became something greater than a mere ancient structure. Old friends bid farewell at Yellow Crane Tower, amid blossoms and mist, drifting down to Yangtze in spring. People do not come to the Yellow Crane Tower simply to look at a building. They come to stand beside the Yangtze River, to touch emotions that have existed for over 1,000 years, and to feel the poetry that generations refuse to let disappear. For more than 1,000 years after the Tang and Song dynasties, even though the tower was destroyed again and again by war and fire, people continued rebuilding it. Stubbornly, they placed the Yellow Crane Tower from the poems back into the real world. Because what people truly could not bear to lose was never just the tower itself, but the shared cultural memory hidden behind those verses. Many people come to Wuhan for the Yangtze River, the bridges, and the skyline, but sometimes the real Wuhan is hidden inside an old street in Wuchang. This is Tanhualin. Old churches, red brick buildings, stone paths, and aging balconies, Western missionaries, modern schools, and the everyday life of old Wuchang once slowly came together here. Even today, this area still preserves the most authentic side of Wuhan's old city. It does not feel like a tourist attraction. It feels more like a piece of the city's past that never completely disappeared.
Whisper softly that I might see you again. Hold me down and watch the water rise. Pull me out and bring me back into this life. 'Cause I'm ready for a forest fire, forest fire.
Unlike Xi'an or Luoyang, Wuhan is not the kind of city where the entire place itself feels like a vast historical museum. What people feel here more often is a modern metropolis shaped by rivers, railways, industry, and the constant movement of crowds. But in Wuhan, there is one of the finest museums in China. That is the Hubei Provincial Museum. And its most famous national treasure is a bronze sword more than 2,000 years old, the sword of King Goujian of Yue. Every day, countless visitors come here specifically to see it. Many are willing to wait in long lines just to catch a glimpse of this legendary ancient sword. Because for many Chinese people, it is no longer just an artifact. It feels more like a legend from history that truly existed in the real world. This sword has almost completely overturned many people's imagination of what a bronze artifact should look like. More than 2,000 years later, when it was unearthed, the blade still appeared cold, sharp, and gleaming. But the reason why so many people are fascinated by the sword of King Goujian is not simply because it was preserved so perfectly. Behind it lies one of the most well-known stories in Chinese history, a legendary tale about defeat, humiliation, years of endurance and self-restraint, and ultimately, a dramatic reversal of fate. Later, Chinese people condensed this story into a 4-character idiom. Wo Xin Chang Dan, sleeping on brushwood, tasting gall every day, constantly reminding oneself never to forget defeat. It became a symbol of endurance, perseverance, and the human will to survive hardship. And this sword, in some way, is one of the last real traces left behind by that story. In 1965, when it was unearthed in Jingzhou, Hubei, a name that had long existed only in history books suddenly seemed to cross more than 2,000 years of time and reappear before people's eyes. But in fact, the Sword of Goujian of Yue may not even be the only breathtaking treasure inside the Hubei Provincial Museum. Within this museum, there is also the Marcus Yi of Zheng's Bianzhong, a set of bronze bells made more than 2,000 years ago, which can still perform complete melodies even today. There is also the massive bronze zun and pan, casting craftsmanship so intricate that it almost feels impossible for its time. And beyond them, countless lacquerwares, jade artifacts, and bronzes from the ancient state of Chu. Together, they piece together the image of a once glorious and mysterious Chu civilization. And the stories behind these artifacts, in the future, I'll continue exploring them through more episodes in this museum documentary series. If the Yellow Crane Tower represents the poetic soul of Wuhan, then Li Huangpi Road feels more like a scar left behind by the city's modern history. The foreign concessions were once among the most humiliating memories in modern Chinese history. After losing a series of wars in the modern era, the Qing government was forced to allow foreign powers to carve out designated areas inside Chinese cities and govern them independently. Although these concessions officially remain Chinese territory, In reality, the Chinese government often had very limited control over them. To many Chinese people at the time, the concessions felt like states within a state. Foreigners built banks, schools, clubs, and apartment buildings here, bringing the appearance of European cities to the banks of the Yangtze River. And it was also under these circumstances that China first came into real contact with modern urban civilization. At its peak, the prosperity of the Hankou concessions even earned the city the nickname the Chicago of the East. Today, Li Huangpi Road stands within what was once the Russian concession of Hankou. Besides hot, dry noodles, perhaps the most iconic snack in Wuhan is Sanxian dupi. Many first-time visitors to Wuhan are surprised by the name dupi, sometimes even mistaking it for a dessert. But authentic Sanxian dupi is actually more like a hearty Wuhan-style breakfast. Beneath its golden, crispy surface is a filling of sticky rice, mushrooms, and diced meat. Fresh off the pan, you can still hear the light crackling sound of the crispy skin against the iron griddle. Its rich, filling flavor, together with its smoky wok aroma, feels a lot like the city of Wuhan itself.
打包厂是1905年英国人修的棉花打包工厂，这是武汉市的优秀历史建筑，跟文物保护单位。 因为它是武汉市最早的混凝土结构的厂房，评为了武汉市的优秀历史建筑。解放以后，这里就是商贸的仓库。然后国家在16年的时候投资1个多亿，把整个园区修缮了一遍。
16年
16年，18年开的园，搞成了一个文创园区。我们整个园区是免费开放的。
More than a century ago, merchant ships from around the world sailed up the Yangtze River to Hankou. Cotton, tea, and raw silk were reloaded here and shipped across the world. And the Pinghe packing factor stands today as one of the industrial relics left behind by that era. The Pinghe packing factory, once filled with the roar of machinery, has now been transformed into a modern creative and office space. Cafes, studios, and offices have once again brought life to this century-old industrial building. More than 100 years ago, this place was filled with cotton and cargo waiting to be shipped across the world. Today, people continue to create new urban stories here. Times have changed, but the red brick walls and old steel structures still preserve the memory of Wuhan's industrial age. These old objects sit quietly in the corners of the room. They have long disappeared from everyday life. Yet inside this century-old factory building, time itself seems to slow down. Outside the window is the Wuhan of today. But these faded relics from the past somehow allow you to briefly touch the atmosphere of life from decades ago. Sometimes, the most moving part of a city is not its grand history, but these small forgotten objects that still remain there quietly, untouched by time. Wuhan often feels a lot like this sculpture standing beside the Yangtze River, rugged, heavy, yet always carrying a force that pushes forward. At night, Jianghan Road pedestrian street becomes especially vivid after the rain. Neon lights reflect across the wet pavement, while crowds of people move slowly between these century-old buildings. This was once one of the busiest commercial centers in Hankou, and even today, it still preserves some of the liveliest urban energy in Wuhan. Old architecture, glowing signs, street music, and the damp air after rain together create the unique atmosphere of a Wuhan night. Sometimes, the most charming part of a city is not simply its famous landmarks, but moments like this, wandering among the lights and crowds, slowly feeling the city's real rhythm of life. At the end of the pedestrian street stands one of the most important customs buildings in modern Hankou. More than a century ago, every foreign merchant ship entering Wuhan had to register, clear customs, and unload cargo here. The chimes of the Jianghan Customs House also witnessed the bustling days of Hankou's shipping era. Even today, it still stands quietly beside the Yangtze River, like a landmark left behind by another age.
In one of Hanyang's old neighborhoods, Guiyuan Temple seemed especially quiet beneath the gentle rain. These two stone lions actually look a little adorable. After being soaked by the rain, they somehow feel warm and approachable instead, as if they were never meant to intimidate anyone, but simply to quietly watch over this temple. Rainwater slowly trickled down the yellow courtyard walls. The scent of incense mingled with the smell of damp wood and wet gray bricks. Inside the temple, even the sound of footsteps was gently swallowed by the rain. The name Guiyuan can perhaps be understood as all things returning to one, a return to the origin. It carries a feeling of ultimately returning to one's inner self. The atmosphere of the entire temple creates a fascinating contrast with the bold, streetwise energy of Wuhan. Outside, the city feels loud, busy, and deeply shaped by its river port past. But inside Guiyuan Temple, everything suddenly slows down. What Guiyuan Temple is most famous for is actually its 500 arhats. Many people in Wuhan grew up with a familiar tradition here. After entering the Arhat Hall, they would begin counting from a certain Arhat statue until reaching the one that matched their age. It is said that the posture, expression, and gestures of that particular Arhat somehow reflect a person's character or even their destiny. It's a tradition that feels deeply rooted in folk culture and deeply Chinese at the same time.
Outside the temple, Wuhan remains loud and busy. Ferries continue crossing the Yangtze, while the traffic keeps moving through the city. But inside Guiyuan Temple, time seems to slow down. Perhaps many people come here not only to pray, but also to find, if only for a brief moment, a sense of quiet within this restless city.